Welcome to another episode of Freelance Fridays, where we answer your questions about freelancing. Today, we are going to be talking about what? We're going to be talking about how do you freelance remotely, and I'm going to give you my tips and tricks for how to do that. I am your host, Matthew Encina. I was a freelancer a long time ago for about 7 years on and off, and for the past 8 years, I've been hiring freelancers as a creative director at Blind. Of course, I am not alone. I am joined by two lovely guests. Who are we? Look at them working on their intros and everything. Unlike my other two co-hosts, these two are wearing regular glasses, not sunglasses.
We were muted.
You guys were muted?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I said. Let's unmute them. Let's just introduce. We got Mr. Ben Burns and Erica. Oh, this is funny. I just told Erica right before the stream, unmute them, and of course, we still run into these technical issues.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day. It's been a long week. If you guys have been paying attention, we've had a lot of streams, lots and lots of content.
Oh, come on. They can't keep up. No way.
No one.
Y'all can't keep up.
We could barely keep up over here.
Indeed.
All right. So let's get into this. So first of all, let's just set it up. Why and when would a company bring on a remote freelancer? So let's look at it from the perspective of a company like ours, a studio like Blind. Well, first of all, maybe the internal and local freelance pool are completely tapped out, and I need to reach out because all of my normal go-tos are gone. Sometimes we just need a specialist, and there's nobody in town that does what this person does. Sometimes the company doesn't have room for you. They just don't literally have any desk space for you. Maybe they just run really lean, low overhead, and they don't want to put more bodies into an office. Lastly, maybe they just don't need you in the office. So that's from the perspective of a company. Now let's look at it from your perspective as the freelancer. Obviously, some people, they like to work wherever they want to work, right? So you have your preferences of working at home or working at, on some beach somewhere. I've never done that, but I know some people do. They want to live that life. So if you're so good and so specialized, people will have to yield to your preferences on how you like to work. They just have to. From your perspective also, maybe all of your necessary equipment is in your home office. I've worked with a lot of illustrators where they have a really nice setup, all this crazy gear, scanners, Wacom tablets, all this stuff that would just be a pain in the butt for them to bring over to the office. So I allow them to work at home. And then lastly, a lot of the people that I do work remotely with, they've developed very deep trust with us because, they worked very hard in gaining our trust, and I don't need to babysit them. So from their perspective, they are primed and ready to work remotely. Ben, is there any other reasons why someone might want to work remote or why a company might hire somebody remotely?
Absolutely. The top of the mind thing is being able to live anywhere and work in expensive cities like LA and New York. That's a huge thing. So the affordability of this area is non-existent. I mean, in my neighborhood where I rent an apartment, homes are $2-3 million, and that's just for your basic 3-bed, 2-bath, if you're lucky to get that.
Right.
What?
So being able to work around or with really high-profile agencies in big cities and work and live anywhere.
Right.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in the last stream or last two streams about working and getting wages and rates that are in very mature markets like LA and New York, but working in some place where the cost of living is very low. If you are doing that, you are balling out of control and you are so smart. I think Beeple, who was on our stream a few months ago, he was doing that. He's living out in the Midwest, very modest life. He does very huge, prolific work, and he's able to make rates that everybody else does over here, maybe even more, and he works in a place where the cost of living is so cheap. So
I think he's in South Carolina now. He moved.
Oh, he's definitely rolling.
Yeah,
for sure.
He's rolling in it. And these are reasons why you would want to work remotely. Okay, so those are reasons why. So now let's talk about how do you reach out? Because I know some of you guys are already asking that. And this episode is not really dedicated to outreach or anything like that. Maybe we'll do a future episode like that. If you guys are interested, make sure to put that in the comment section below so we know that that's something you guys are interested in. But I wanted to give one example so you guys could get a sense of what this looks like. So let's do a little story time with Alexandru, who runs our Twitter and Facebook, or LinkedIn as well. Alexandru, he volunteered to help us a while back. I think it was sometime last year, where he was chatting with Chris Doe in our Future Fans group, and he offered to do some annotations on our YouTube. So he came in, he started doing a little bit of work, and then I think Ben had reached out to him for a potential trial run as an intern to help run more of our social media channels.
Right.
So Ben, you did a little trial run with Alex.
Yeah. So we started off with, I think it was a 2-week trial run. I mean, it was a little intimidating at first because the way that I saw it was there's this just random dude from across the globe. You know, he lives in Romania, and we were entrusting him with the core of our marketing funnel, which is our social media. Mm-hmm. And so there was a trust gap that I was like, okay, let's do this trial run. Let's figure things out. And he blew me away. And from there, we were like, okay, let's go ahead and bring you on a full-time basis.
And he's been working with us for like a year now.
Yeah. And if you guys have been on our Twitter and, somebody's picked a fight with you, it's probably Alex. And if you aren't following us on Twitter and any social platform, it's at The Future Is Here. So follow us there. You'll get some interesting, very different content than you do here on the YouTube channel. Okay, so let's go to my remote freelance tips. So I work with a good handful of remote freelancers. Before I would only exclusively work with people in-house because of that trust issue, right? Like I couldn't see myself working with somebody that I couldn't see, I couldn't hear from, and I had no idea what they were doing. I wanted the visibility. So what were the tips? What were the things that got me over that hump so that I could allow myself to feel comfortable with working with remote freelancers? So here is my tips. Tip number 1, focus on how you make their jobs easier and better. So essentially what I'm talking about here is if they have a choice between a local freelancer and a remote freelancer, you have to make that experience better, even better than working with somebody in-house. Just like Alex did with Ben, you have to find a way to make that experience so good that they would consider you over the local talent, right? Second, you have to make it convenient and anticipate any needs way ahead of time. So if you're asking really good questions up front, making any asset requests up front, then you know exactly what you need in order to operate for the length of the project or the duration of that week. You are doing that way ahead of time and understanding the needs. Lastly, you don't want to be annoying. I think the worst offsite freelancers, even though the freelancers that work in-house, like the worst ones are the ones that bug you every 5 minutes. Hey, can I get this? Hey, can you look at this? Hey, can you check out this? It's like, oh my gosh. Don't ask me these things. Ask me in bunches, right? Like ask me up front, figure out what it is that you need, and then go dark and go work on your thing, and then let's check up in a couple of days, couple of hours, whatever that is. Just don't be annoying with the request. So tip number 1, make it easy, make it better than working with somebody in-house. Tip number 2, set up very clear expectations on how you'll work. I feel like a lot of freelancers, they just jump right in and they're like, okay, here's my rate, let's do this. It's like, okay. You have to set up very clear expectations. This is with any relationship in life. All relationships are made or broken based off of meeting or failing expectations. So in terms of freelancers, this is some of the things that you need to be asking about or setting expectations for. So when you start a project, make sure you get a creative brief. What is the goals? What are the objectives? And what are the creative parameters that you need to work in? 2, what are the deliverables? What do you need to deliver? How many? And by when? And then lastly, when and how often are you going to check in? Is that once a day? Is that AM and PM? Set something up with the studio or company that you're working with so that you have regular times for check-ins and make that convenient for both of you guys, okay? So set up clear expectations. That's tip number 2. Tip number 3, this one's very important. Communicate clearly and be transparent.
And this goes along this goes along with
Bridget. Oh my God.
the expectations. You have to be very clear. If you're not clear, you're going to drive some people mad. And that goes both for in-house and offsite freelancing. So when you communicate with somebody, it's always important to give context, the why behind your decision. So if you're doing checkups, if you're showing work, it's like, hey, Matthew, check out this work. Here's what I did, how it addressed your goals, your challenges, the objectives, and here are some of the design decisions I made. They're not arbitrary, they're very objective, right? Be very clear about what you're doing and what. Don't just send me images or don't just send me work in progress with no context. You know why? If you don't send me any context, I'm going to start commenting on all kinds of random stuff that you don't want me to be commenting on. You need me to be focused on what it is that you want me to be looking at and how you want me to be evaluating and critiquing the work. Okay? So that's number one. Always give context. Number two, tell them when you post your work in progress, what you've done and what to expect next. I think it's very important that you make sure you're always setting the expectations. Here's where we last came from. Here's what I did this posting, and here's what I'm going to do next based off of the feedback you gave me.
I think I'm getting better at that.
Yes, you are. Erica was somebody who had a lot of challenge with this early on, where she would just show me stuff without context, and I would be like, Erica, why? Like, what are we looking at? And I would give her all kinds of crazy feedback. And, none of it would make sense. And then after I give my feedback, she would try and recap and say, well, I did this because of that. And then, what you're saying here doesn't make sense here. And it's like, well, we were not on the same page to begin with because she wasn't clear communicating to me up front what it is I should actually be looking at and how I should be evaluating the work. But Erica, you've gotten so much better at that now, right?
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I'm asking.
Yeah, I have.
She'll just take the compliment. It's cool.
What?
No.
I'm taking the compliment. No,
Yeah.
I have gotten better. I think about it and I'm like, what would Matthew say?
Exactly. Right. You just remember, how would Matthew present that?
Yes.
All right. Let's get back to the clear and transparent tips. So you also have to highlight any challenges you foresee. So if something is being asked of you, if you're getting feedback or you're working on something and you're like, oh my gosh, this is taking way longer, you have to let the person you're working for know way ahead of time. Don't wait till delivery day to say, here's the work, but it wasn't quite finished, or here's the work, but I couldn't get this thing done. You have to let me know way ahead of time and say, like, I know we agreed on this, but there's a challenge that we're facing and I'm not quite there. Is there anything I can do to shortcut this, or what's the most important thing here? What's the priority for me to address, right? And lastly, you have to let the person you're working with know when you're available and not. If you don't set up these clear barriers of I'm available from 10 to 7 and I'm out between 12 and 2 because that's my lunch, then I might be, as the employer, I might be slacking you or texting you or calling you. And I might be furious. It's like, oh my gosh, why the heck isn't Ben picking up? I told him to get this thing done and he's not picking up. What the heck? Like, I need this right now. But if you told me way ahead of time and say, you know what, Matthew, my hours are this and this is the best times to reach me, then I know I can't be calling you during those times. So just be very clear and transparent about how you're going to work together. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So, I had a little story about Elle. Elle is also another social media manager. She focuses a lot on our marketing. She focuses on our Instagram, Facebook, and email. So if you talk to any of those things, it's mostly her. She runs our Facebook ads. The thing is, Elle's been working with us for maybe 6 months now. She started by working in-house here as an intern, and now she is all over the world. She was in UK a few weeks ago, in Texas a week ago, and I think she's going to Canada next week. So she's kind of all over the place. But the thing is, I don't even know that she's not in the office. Like, it doesn't feel like she's not in the office. She's so good at setting my expectations, understanding, checking in once a week of what the big goals are and just executing. And I just see the work getting done. I don't even have to check in. Like, that's how amazing the experience has been working with Elle. If you're watching, thanks, Elle.
I noticed she's gone.
Yeah, you noticed she's gone. You guys were pretty good friends.
Yes.
Chatting here. But I mean, in terms of the work, what's getting done, it's still getting done regardless if she was working in the office or working remote. It feels no different.
She's just great like that.
That's actually kind of what I wrote down. As a freelancer, especially when you're remote, you are an independent contractor. And so you need to fulfill the independent part. You need to be a self-starter, and you need to not expect so much from the people who are giving you the job, because you're there to serve them. And so, Matthew mentioned earlier, we don't want to always have to deal with the freelancers that are remote. The best ones are the ones that get in, get the work done, and require very little touch from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very little attention. So let's open it up to YouTube. If you guys have any questions, drop it in the comment section below. Ben, is there anything that has come up since we started the stream?
Yeah, absolutely. So this comes from Jason Stroud. He asks, how do you manage a schedule for working in different time zones?
Okay. So like I said earlier, you want to make the experience as good as it possibly can be for the other employer. So, if they're holding all the power, like if you really want to work with them and they have a lot of options, what you got to do is make it convenient for them. So I've had some people, Alex being one of them actually, who he's in a time zone that maybe is 9 hours ahead, 13 hours ahead, something crazy in Romania. I'm not really sure. But he works on our hours. Every time we have a meeting, like we have a 10 a.m. meeting or 11 a.m. meeting, he's there. And I think every time he calls in, it's like midnight over there. So the thing I'm trying to get at is work on the schedule of your employer. I think that's probably the best bet, because you're making their life so easy. You're not making it inconvenient for me to now work on your schedule, right? Like now that's a pain point. That's a point of friction. And those little points of friction add up. So you want to just try and keep things as frictionless as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you don't have to be available at 3 a.m. all the time.
Right.
There's going to be some understanding there. But what's interesting is if you held office hours, that would be really kind of creative. You'd have a section of your day, or maybe it's like 2 days a week, that you would be available during the client's time zone.
Right.
We do this at Blind with clients on the East Coast. So we will literally shift our hours to work early mornings so that we're available for our clients in New York.
And Ben's done some crazy stuff where he had to do a lot of client work recently, where he's up at 12 a.m. at night doing client interviews for people in Europe.
Yep.
So, I mean, it was just an important client. It just had to be done. So he got the job done. So you just make it convenient for the other person. Okay. So is there any more on that? Any follow-ups on that, or can I move on?
No follow-ups. I think you're good to move on.
Okay, great. So now let's talk about the danger zone. Let's see. Do we have
danger zone?
There we go. So the danger zone. The danger zone is a couple of things. So the danger zone is when you're not done yet. You're working through, you agreed that something's going to get done on Friday, and it's due at 5 p.m., and it's 4 p.m., and you're like, oh, shoot, I am not done yet. So when you're not done yet, like I said earlier, you have to let your employer know way ahead of time if there's going to be anything that's going to cause you from missing the posting. Because in many cases, if you let me know ahead of time the thing that I asked you to do is taking longer than expected, then I could try and work my best to see if I could postpone or just prepare for that. If you give me no prep time, if I know that, I'm going to expect something from Ben at 5 p.m. and I'm going to just send my PDF out and it's not there, I'm going to stress out because I didn't communicate to my client. I like to be very clear and transparent with my clients. So you have to do the same for me, right? Another point of the danger zone, these two are related, when the employer is asking you too much, to do way too much, right? Or they're going out of scope and they're expecting you to do some unpaid overtime. We have a video on how to get out of unpaid overtime, which we will add as a card in this section here. But when a task is asked of you and it seems like way out of your capabilities, you have to let that employer know. You have to just be very clear and say, I'm glad you're trusting me to do all of this work, but I got to be honest. I'm challenged because I feel like I can't get all of this done in the time frame you provided. Or I can't get to the rendering quality that you're looking for in the time provided or under this scope. So are there any other ways that we could approach this project? Can we prioritize a few things and let some other things be lower quality? Or can we address that the next round? Because I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how I can get this done. And honestly, like if somebody were to tell me that up front, I could plan around that. That's so perfect. You are upfront with me. My expectations are clear of you. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to reduce your workload by 75%. I'm going to put this onto my internal team or hire another freelancer to pick up the slack. Thank you for being honest. You just have to be upfront with this stuff. Don't be scared. Don't go away and assume it's like, oh shoot, I have to do all this work now and stress out and I have to be working 24 hours straight. That's just silly. Don't do that. Just be honest. The second part of it is going out of scope, and it's the same issue, right? Like if it's going way out of scope, if you guys agreed it would be 2 days and now it's on 5 days, you got to get paid for that. And again, we have a video on that. I will add that as a card here, and you guys can watch that to see how we reply to that. Then lastly, another danger zone area is ghosting. This is if you were booked for a week with a client or an employer. You posted your work on Wednesday and you hear nothing. Thursday go by and you hear nothing. So what do you do? So in these situations, you have to reach out, right? You have to follow up. It's like, hey, Matthew, I posted on Wednesday like we agreed. I didn't hear anything on Thursday. I'm just following up again. Make sure it's good. I'm still moving along on the project over here, even though I didn't get feedback because I know we're supposed to be done by Friday. So you're still moving along. You're not stopping your work. You're still going. Hopefully you can get the feedback. If you still don't hear back from me, maybe something happened to me. Maybe something happened to the employer. Reach out to somebody else on their team. It's like, hey, I just wanted to check in. I posted this for Matthew. He didn't respond. Just checking if everything's all right over there. So that would be the second time you reach out. Reach out to somebody else. Then you could call. If all else fails, if it gets to Friday and it's the end of your booking, it's like, here's all the work. I took this as far as I could based off of the last round of direction that I got. I didn't get any more updates, so I'm assuming we're all good to go. Here's the work. Here are the files. And here's my invoice. If you need any more changes, just let me know. And that's pretty much it. Those are like the danger zones. I don't know if there's anything else danger zone-wise that you could think of, Mr. Ben.
Well, you also don't want to ghost on the employer either.
Yeah.
So that goes two ways. Boy, you do that to me. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, now this is a really easy one. Let's just talk about tools real quick. What do we use? So this should be in your toolbox. We like to use file sharing, cloud sharing, so we could exchange files back and forth, Dropbox. So with remote freelancers, I like to use Dropbox so that I can have access to their layered files in case, let's say if they're on the other side of the world and they're dark and I know it's past their office hours, I could just go in their file, find the layered version and make the tweaks myself. So I don't have to bother them. And it's just very easy because everything's synced. It's as if they were working on our local server here. Secondly, Slack. We love Slack. Slack is the easiest way to communicate with anybody, different time zones. It's good to just set up different projects within your Slack, and that's how we like to work here at Blind in the future. So you guys should be using something like that. Email. Email's powerful, man. People still use it. It's just a good way to do like bigger updates, bigger check-ins, and sending invoices and information back and forth. Lastly, if you guys are really advanced, or maybe if the studio is using some kind of project management software like Trello or Notion, this is just a good way to keep track of tasks, all of your to-dos, and move stuff along so that you could see the process or the progress of your deliverables as they go through each part of the process of design. Okay.
I'd like to add one to that. In addition to Dropbox, also Frame.io.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
So if you're doing any video work or any motion design work, Frame.io is just a check-in tool. Basically, you upload your work there, and people can write in comments directly on the time code. And there's also web tools very similar. So if you're doing any kind of web or digital work, you could use things like Sketch or Figma, where you could post your work in progress, and somebody like Ben could comment directly on there and give you feedback on specific pixels. So like pixel perfect, I want you to tweak this thing, and this thing. So it's like, it feels like you're just working in the office. Okay. So let's do a little bit of story time. I wanted to talk about another freelancer that I work with. His name is Sean. And for Sean, oops, I put Elle there. I just copied the slide over. But Sean, for 2 months, he ran a huge animation project for me offsite that was like 3D, character animation, crazy rendering. And normally we do those things in-house where I have a big team in here. But I worked it out with Sean where it's like, you know what? If you tell me you could do this, I trust you. And we had been working together for many years, so I trust the guy. He's very responsible, so he's earned that trust. So I let him work from home for 2 months, and he was very available. He worked on Dropbox, like I said. We communicated through Slack, email, calls. He was available on client calls. He was taking those with me. He thought ahead of time and warned me of any issues. Like I said, he told me whenever there was rendering issues or anything where he was like, you know what, I don't agree with this note from the client. Can we push back from that? Or it's like, you know what, this note that they're asking us to do is going to take a really long time. So he was very clear about any warning signs that he felt and wanted me to communicate to client. And then lastly, he was just very clear about vacation and downtime. Through that 2 months, he had a few days of vacation. There was times where he's like, I got to go pick up my son from school, or I want to spend time with the kids here. He was just upfront with me. And I was like, that's totally fine. I know not to call you during those periods. And as long as you get the work done at the end of the week, I don't care how you spend your time. All I care about is the deliverable and the goals. So that was Sean, and he made my life so easy. And it was great for us because we agreed on a good project rate. He got paid what he was worth. He got to work at home with his kids. He managed all of the setup, all the hardware, all the software. All I had to manage was the relationship with the client and making sure that we were on track with our milestones. Super easy, even better than having freelancers here in-house. So that was Sean. So let's open it up to Q&A. Are there any other questions on YouTube that are coming up?
Yeah, I got a really good one.
Okay.
So this one comes from Mark Yellen, and it's a doozy.
Oh, thanks,
So-
man. You could have given me a softball.
No softballs. No softballs.
all right.
It's not a softball Friday. It's not softball Saturday. All right. He wants to know, how do you convince employers to allow you to work remote? So how would you ask your employer how to work remotely?
Okay. Well, like I was saying throughout this piece, to me, it's all about deep trust, making sure you hit your deliverables on time and you're communicating very clear and setting up expectations. So if you're already doing that in-house, or if you're already doing that with an employer you're working with now, it should be pretty easy to ask. Like if you were approaching me, hey, Matthew, I know we've been working together for quite some time now, and have you been happy with the results we've been getting? And I will say, yes, it's been very pleasant working with you. Everything you've done has been amazing. Like, well, I've been wanting to do a lot more, spend more time at home because I have a lot of these hobbies or whatever it is. I was wondering if it would be possible to work from home. I'm not going to make it inconvenient for you at all. I'm going to basically make it feel like I'm still working here. I'll be available on Slack, on Dropbox, and I've thought about how we could work together, and here's what that looks like: A, B, C, and D. I would like to do this as a trial run. Maybe we could try this for a week and see if there's any friction there, because I'm happy to work out anything that might be a problem. How does that sound to you, Matthew? So I would probably approach it something like that, where it's like you're just trying to make it easy for the employer. You're trying to reinforce that, yes, you've done a good job. You got to make sure you're doing that at first. And then that you're willing to adjust whatever you need to in order to make it even better for the employer. Ben, do you have any tips for that? How would you approach that?
Yeah, I would just frame it in benefits. You don't want to go all, off the deep end with that kind of stuff. It's going to be great.
Right.
All that stuff. But I would frame it like, listen, I feel like I can be more productive in my sweatpants. And seriously, I mean, look, I feel like, and this personally, I write better when I'm sitting at home in my bed. Got a little lap desk. I got, I hear my daughter running around out there, and I love that zone, and I write a lot better there. And
Right.
so if you can say, look, I'd love to do this trial run for a week because I think that I can be more productive and get more done for you. Also, you can also pitch it as avoiding distractions in the office.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to give some reason and some context in order for your boss to have that empathy that's going to allow you to get out.
Right. That's great. So Ben would say something like, I feel like there's a lot going on at the office. I know my primary role here is just to write. And I feel like I could get a lot more done for you if I was distraction free. Can we try for a week if I work from home? Because I feel like I could get a lot more done and you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck.
Beautiful.
Right? Cool. Is there more questions from YouTube? That was a great question, by the way. And I'm glad we had an answer.
That's it. And we're almost out of time. So,
all right. Well, oh, shoot. There's my last slide. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. This has been another episode of Freelance Fridays. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow designers and creatives. If you like this episode, check out the other episodes here. I will add them, and you can check out episode 1 and 2. And if you want us to cover more stuff in future